Hey y'all, you are watching this after you have watched the YouTube video about how your brain can grow and learn. And it might be feeling like a science class, right? We're talking about our brains and how it all works. And you're like, I thought this was math class. It is, but we can learn math better if we understand how our brain works, right? So the biggest thing I hope you learned from that video was this, that your brain can learn math. When I was growing up, I had four siblings, okay, three sisters and a brother. And I thought we all just were kind of born a certain way. My mom was very good at math. She kind of did all of the bills paying and the accounting stuff with our farm. My dad loved history and loved watching documentaries and loved reading the newspaper and all of that. And so my siblings and I were kind of split. There were some of us that loved history and did a lot of history classes when we got into high school. And then there were a couple of my siblings that like were big math nerds and like loved taking calculus and big math classes in high school. And I always thought I took after my dad. I loved history, did not like math growing up. And I thought that's just the way it was. That's like the way the genetics works, is that you're just kind of born a certain way, right? And maybe you have that too. Maybe you have a parent that's like, anytime you have math homework, they're like, nope, sorry, you got to wait for your dad or you got to wait for your mom. They're the ones that understand this math these days, right? I know all of your parents have been like, oh, they teach math so differently now, right? Or you might have thought to yourself, you know what? My brain doesn't work that way. I don't get it. Like, this is the end of my brain capacity, right? I filled it up. I understood everything until we got to third grade, and then we started fractions, and my brain just can't handle it. And so some of you may have had those thoughts, like I have, thinking that, oh, your brain is the way it is. It was born that way, and it stayed that way. But after watching and listening to the examples in that video, I hope you can see that there is real research that shows that your brain can change. And looking back now at my life, I can see that couple of my siblings got really good at math because they liked it and they did a lot of it and they practiced it and they made mistakes with it, right? From the last video, they worked at it more, so they got better at it. And now I believe it's not like, oh, they're just better at math than I am. Now I believe that, you know what, if I had put forth the same amount of effort and practiced as many times as they practice with their math, I could understand math just as well as they understood math. The only reason I didn't is because I didn't like it, so I didn't do it. They exceeded because they put more work into it. So that's kind of the example from my life. I want to kind of review what they talked about with your brain having all these like pathways and synapses firing. The way I like to think of it is when I look at this, like, I don't know if this is a real image or just like a created image of a brain and the synapses and the pathways. I like to think of like this pathway right here is something that you know how to do really well. Like walking. Like you can walk without having to think about it, right? Or something that you do really well just naturally. Riding a bike or like writing your name, something you can do without thinking. I think of it as this pathway. And the synapses have fired enough that it's just this pathway. The electric current goes through very quickly. Okay. But then if we look at these smaller pathways, it might be something that you have more difficulty with, that you haven't done a lot of yet, like a big kickflip on a scooter or something. I probably slaughtered that, but some trick or something that you just like crocheting something or doing some craft that is hard, right? That pathway, you haven't done it enough that it's become natural and you can do it without breathing. Okay, I think of my daughter when she was learning how to walk. Her walking, even though our walking is like this, when she was learning to walk, it was like a tiny little thing. Like she had to like completely focus and she had to like focus every single step on walking and on balancing, right? So that pathway, those synapses hadn't fired enough for her. She hadn't had enough experience with walking to make it a really thick pathway. Another way that I like to think of your brain working and the synapses firing, creating bigger and wider pathways, is the thinking of a trail. You'll notice in my classroom, I have a big mural, big wallpaper hanging of a forest because I just love the peace and the feeling you get from looking outside. So when I think of a trail and a brain, I think of if I were going through the forest to grandmother's house and I were to cut through the forest, it'd be really difficult, right? There'd be branches, there would be roots that I couldn't see because of all the overgrown stuff down here, and it would take me a long time to get to grandmother's house, right? So that first time would be the most difficult. And the second and third time, you would start to be able to kind of see your path, right? Because there'd be these bushes that or these plants that you've stepped on, so it's got kind of flat. And over again, that trail is going to appear. And first it'll be pretty little, right? But as you go over it more and more and more times, that trail is going to widen. Just like this trail here, where it's kind of free of branches, free of roots, free of big boulders that stand in your way. And by the 1000th time you go to grandma's, it's like a walk in the park. It's really easy. So this year, you're going to hear me talk a lot about this trail in your brain. Is it when you do something for the first time in math, it's going to feel like you're going to grandmother's house and there's no trail. You're just going to have to bushwhack through everything. And it is hard. Okay. But the more you go through and the more you do that step over and over again in math, the wider your trail is going to get. And my goal for you, and I hope your goal for yourself, is that you get a trail. I like to say, you know it well when your trail is paved because you know it so well. It's just a breeze. You could do it in your sleep. You do it with your eyes closed. That's how I want math to get. And I know it only happens with a lot of practice, but I know you know now that you can believe in yourself and you can do it. So I want you to know you can learn math. Such a cool fact, right? Another cool thing about your brain is that everyone's brain works differently. You already know that your brain is way different than your annoying little sibling, right? And your brain is way different than what your parents' brain is. And that is true for all of us. And it's true about math too, math as well. We all see math differently. And that's why your teachers in the past have kind of taught different ways to get to a certain, because we all see math differently. So your teacher's trying to help this person that sees it visually, this person who sees patterns. That's why we try to teach you lots of different methods because we all think differently. If you don't think that's true, I want to do a little experiment with you. So I'm going to have you look at the following picture. I'm only going to put it on for like a split second, and there's going to be some black dots. I want you to quickly count the black dots. Okay, you're not going to be able to go 1, 2, 3. It's not going to be that fast. You just kind of have to look at it and kind of do some of your strategies to figure out how many there are. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to flip it in 3, 2, 1. Go. How many circles were there? I'm going to pause it. I'm going to make you write in your guess. Okay. Did you guess 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Did you guess 6? Yeah, most of the time people guess 6. Now here's the cool part. Here's how I know everyone's brain sees math differently. Whenever I do this in class, I then have this and I then get volunteers. How did you know there were 6 dots? I didn't give you enough time to count them all individually. So how did you know? And this is what students come up with. I'll have students raise their hand and say, well, I saw there were 3 here and then I saw 3 here. That 3 and 3 is 6. That's how I knew there were 6. And someone else will raise their hand and say, that's not what I saw at all. I saw 3 here and 3 there. 3 and 3 is 6. Okay, someone else will say, well, I saw 3 and 2 in this single one, which I knew 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6. And we could go on and like, I need more than just 9 of these to get everyone's response because everyone sees math differently. You might have seen it differently than what these 3 examples were. And that's what's so cool about math and so cool about your brain. So remember that if you're like, I don't get this at all, it's because you just see math differently. It's not that you're like, don't have the math brain. Your brain just works differently. And it's so cool however your brain works. It's just you need to get to know yourself and your brain to figure out what will help you understand math. So takeaway from this video, there is no such thing as a math brain. You're going to go home and tell your parents that whoever aunt, uncle, or cousin or family member that says they have the math brain or they don't, you're going to go home and be like, actually, guess what? You don't. And you just practice a lot more than everyone else. Okay. So I also want you to know that anyone can learn any level of math with hard work and effort. I couldn't go into a calculus class right now just because I'm like, oh, my brain's amazing. I can learn it. I couldn't go into that class and understand a single thing. But I know that with work and effort, and if I worked through the process to understand it, I could understand it. Okay. Everyone sees math differently. I want you to remember that. The way that your brain works is awesome. It's unique. It's you. You're an awesome individual. See you next time.